In your work, what physical qualities do you consistently see male dancers or dance students lacking? And then how do you go about approaching improving them?
Okay, it's interesting because I think every male dancer that I've had the opportunity to work with has been different. I've had male dancers who are incredibly strong, but then lack flexibility. I've had male dancers who uh, don't have strength or flexibility, and then have to develop both. Um, I've had young dancers who are not necessarily at the point of needing to build upper body strength yet because they're not doing a lot of lifting and partnering yet. And then I've had dancers who are maybe at that point where they're looking at company work but haven't done any partnering and don't have the strength and don't have the skill yet. So then it's a rapid process of developing what they need to be able to do. Um, I think probably what I would say is this is more of an issue of expectation, industry expectation of young dancers and what they are wanting to see when they come into a company versus the reality of how the young male physique actually develops. It's very rare that you're going to get a boy, especially a boy who has been predominantly in dance, having the muscular structure necessary to do a lot of the lifting that they need to do around the age of 18, 19. And I do believe that a lot of the reason why we have these trainee programs and second companies and things like that, they all developed out of this desire to have a stronger male dancer coming into the company and not getting injured, not having back injuries and shoulder injuries because they're trying to push themselves to do partnering that their bodies structurally aren't ready for. I think, you look at the average guy really doesn't start to build muscle like that until they're 22, 23, 24, right? And it does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of practice and it's a very slow build. It's just like with anything, you're not going to go in and rapidly push to massive weights. You're going to gradually progress that over time, progressive overload to build strength. And so, I mean, even now, if I look at myself compared to what I was when I was dancing, I'm able to lift much more weight and much stronger and much more proficiently than I was even able to towards the end of my career at 30. Right, like this is 8 years later, but it's because I've been training consistently now for 8 years, whereas I didn't do that as a dancer. So I think probably one of the things that I would suggest that dancers look at and very important to their development is to train those functional movements. Think about the main functional movements that we're working on, the knee hinge exercises as a first point. So things like squats and lunges, hip hinge exercises, things like deadlifts and glute bridges and hip thrusts. And then taking that up to the upper body, looking at your vertical push, vertical pull, horizontal push, horizontal pull. So understanding that in ballet, we do train a very specific type of movement, and that movement doesn't always translate to being functional and healthy. We often train hip hinge out of dancers from a very young age. Like if we think about port de bras forward, we train them not to hinge at the hip. We train them to hinge more at the waist. And so one of the main things that I see with dancers is when they come into the gym and you tell them to do a deadlift, they can't do it because they try they try to keep their pelvis perfectly neutral and everything in the same place, and they can't actually stick their butt out to get that proper hip hinge. So what I would say initially is I look at young men especially, and I think, okay, well, what are the things that are missing from this young man's natural functional movement because they've trained as a dancer, that we need to get back into their body so that they're not just functional dancers, they're functional humans, right? Like that's my first point, because we want to be as healthy as possible, and that health does come from being able to move correctly. The second thing that I would say is we need to then figure out, how do we make sure that that dancer isn't getting injured because they don't have that functional movement? So if they are constantly walking around in a turned out externally rotated foot position because that's what they're training all day, and then they're developing knee issues or ankle issues because they're not walking properly and they've developed an unusual gait pattern, potentially we need to train those muscles so that they're not a problem. If we're looking at their knees and their knees are not tracking properly because their vastus lateralis is overtrained as opposed to their vastus medialis, potentially then we need to look at training and making sure that they're doing more squats in parallel so that that's developing. So I look at it more from a potential of what is this young dancer going to struggle with due to the way that dance has trained them? How do we make sure that they're going to stay healthy? How do we make sure that they're strong enough for the work they have to do in the studio? And then put that all together to make sure that they don't end up injured.